Welcome to See You at USC. I'm your Wednesday night host, Mackie Kravitz. And tonight on this very special finale episode, we have actress Thora Birch here in the studio. It's going to make for a great episode, so be sure to stay tuned. Welcome back to See You at USC. I'm joined now by Thora Birch. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, people know you as an actress for many different films, and they may know you from a very small age to something very recent. So do you mind just telling us how you got started in this industry?
Sure. Well, I actually started when I was 4 years old, just doing local commercials. I actually did one of the first round of non-animated California Raisins commercials. And when I was 6, I landed a network television show called Day by Day. It was a sitcom, Gary David Goldberg, and I just kind of fell in love with the process at that age. You know, going to set. It was like
exciting,
a party every day, and getting to be around all these adults, and it was just it was a blast. And you know, I worked steadily throughout my childhood. I was really fortunate to work with like a lot of my idols who were my idols at that time.
No way.
And around, I'd say though, when my shift focused from just having fun on set to really treating acting as a full-on part-time, full-on job, was probably around 9, 10, when it was really sinking in about what the difference was between me and, let's say, somebody else, and kind of the beginning fragments of trying to develop a character and all that. And I was just a huge movie fan too, so it was fun for me to be an audience member participating in the show.
So you really just grew up on a soundstage, on a set.
Pretty much.
So how did you learn kind of the tools of acting, or who did you watch to learn?
Well, that's kind of a mixed bag answer. I think first and foremost you watch the people that you're working with, always. But then also that as a child, you have that sort of obsessive quality where you find a couple of films and you watch them over and over, and then that kind of introduces you to actors that you like, and you notice that you like certain actors repeatedly and for different reasons. So you just kind of build an awareness, and it all starts with that. And then, obviously the collaborative nature of the process itself, just working with really good directors and other really, really good actors, it kind of all rubs off on you without you even having to put a lot of effort into it. You're kind of studying without realizing that you're studying. So
you mentioned earlier that you got to work with your idols at the time. Who were some of your idols?
Well, for me, my first love definitely was Harrison Ford. I mean, at that time I was 8 and 9, and Raiders of the Lost Ark was the ultimate for me. And if anyone could be like my dad, that was like, oh please, Harrison Ford. And then the audition and getting the role was so exciting. But then after that, I had a really great streak. Bette Midler, Don Johnson, Melanie Griffith, doing really solid performances in Paradise, and just a lot of great character actors. Ned Beatty, Shelley Winters. Those are names probably you might not be familiar with, but at the time it was big, big stuff. So
working with someone like Harrison Ford, who has such a career and a persona in this industry, were you nervous?
Terrified. Absolutely.
How did you deal with that?
I don't know. I said some really embarrassing stuff, mainly a whole bunch of fangirl things. I remember before one take, right before they said action, I actually turned to him and said, by the way, I really loved The Getaway, or whatever it was. And he's like, why are you telling me this now? And of course my head just turned beet red. Well, it's being 12 for you,
Well, that's why they have second takes.
Exactly, yeah. Sometimes it's hard to not whip out your little autograph book, can you please sign this?
Yeah. Well, when you're working with people of that caliber, which you were so lucky to do, so did they ever come to you and try to give you advice and tips, and did you kind of pick their brains?
You try. People tend to be, nobody knows anything. in this business, apparently. I mean, I've asked people before, and I've been asked, and it's always a tricky question, like, oh, do you have any advice, or can you give me any advice, or, you know, what would you do in this situation? What should I do? You know, tell me something, anything. Give me some pearls of wisdom. The greatest pearl is nobody knows nothing, and if they are giving you advice, you probably shouldn't take it. So it's kind of, the whole industry is kind of just like a big question mark, and it's like how to get ahead. It really is like a stumbling block. It's like skiing, basically. You know, you can pretend that you're skillfully falling down a mountain, but you're still just falling down a mountain. Yeah.
Well, everyone has their own path. You know, every single person that comes in here, and we ask them for advice, and they just go, like, keep doing it.
Yeah.
Like, there is no one way I can tell you to do.
I would say that if because it is so difficult, and because the interest in the industry itself is so broad, and it is very competitive, I would say that, to be brutally honest, if you can envision yourself doing something else, then pursue it. Because mainly the common thread amongst people who have either had longevity or incredible success is they'll always say, if I'm not doing this, I'll either be in jail or an insane asylum. You have to have that kind of passion and drive for what you're doing. Yeah.
I love that.
Well,
it's brutally honest, but it's also
if you think you can do something else, that means you probably should be.
I want to go back because you said you did commercials first. That was your initial.
Right.
Did you know you wanted to move into film or do this seriously then, or was it just kind of fun?
Well, basically up until around like 8 or 9, it was just a lot of fun. And it wasn't, you know, it didn't really impede anything. You know, I'd go to work in the summer and go to school the rest of the time. But then as work became more regular, school becomes, you have to kind of choose. You know, either you're going to totally lock down and just do the school thing and go back to being like a normal kid, or continue on. And when I was presented, every time I was presented with that question, I always didn't understand why school would have to be in the way of me engaging in this activity that I really loved. So around the age of, let's say, you know, 11 or 12, it was definitely, no, I'm an actor. You know, that's what I do. That's what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah. So did you forego like the public school route and just got tutored on sets and while you were working?
The laws are very specific. I mean, while you're working, you have to be tutored. You have to get your education. It's 3 hours a day, no matter what. But no, I went the public school route all the way down the line until around second year of high school, when just, you know, work schedule was really heavy, and I wasn't really thriving socially and with people my own age. So the bullying became kind of an issue, and I could just easily immerse myself in work anyway. So for the last
use it.
Yeah, well, I did.
That's interesting though, because a lot of times you hear with child actors that they don't have a normal childhood, quote unquote, and they don't get that experience growing up around other people. But it sounds like you kind of managed.
I didn't really want the normal anyway, so that wasn't a big loss for me. I think later when I hit my 20s, it was like, oh no, it had a larger impact than I thought it did. So you kind of go on that learning curve as well.
Was it more of like a parents pushing you into this, or did you seek it kind of on your own?
I mean, objectively, I can't really say. I just remember being asked an awful lot, like, if I was happy and if I wanted to keep going. And always my answer was immediately yes.
Yeah.
So that's what I can say for sure that I know. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, you talked earlier about working with idols and stuff like that, and you've been on so many projects that have been nominated and great things like American Beauty. Now, did you know at the time that was going to be, that movie was going to blow up and potentially win an Oscar for Best Picture?
Well, I don't know if I was necessarily looking at the project in terms of like, are we going to go to the Oscars? But I just remember having a reaction to that script, unlike any script I had read before. It really opened my eyes into a new type of film. You know, it is obviously a more philosophically based story, and had a lot of literary devices and symbolism and all this cool, funky, arty stuff that I hadn't really been exposed to on a cinematic level. And it just kind of, when I first read it, it just kind of hit me. I was like, oh, right, this is the power of film. Like, that's what these people are talking about when they talk about it. was like, this is an example of that. And I loved Jane so much. So I knew it was a special piece and a special project, and the director was already a proven talent, really phenomenal. Kevin Spacey, I was already a fan of his work, and Annette's as well.
Yeah.
So it was another thing like, wow, I can't believe I get to go to work with these people every day. So that was a great gift, because it came at a time when, you know, I was moving out of the childhood thing and into adulthood, and that transition can be tricky for a lot of actors. And I probably was close to like, oh, okay, well, there's no place for me anymore in this realm. And then I saw that script and that character, and it kind of like sucked me right back into it.
It's interesting because a lot of times with child actors, you see them being typecasted as just the child actor.
Sure.
And they usually don't make it past the age of like high school. So how do you think you were able to defeat that and kind of grow into these more mature roles?
Perseverance with luck, you know, just not giving up and kind of, you know, sticking with it, and just incredible luck. I mean, I did have a resume already, so that kind of helped.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta have experience to gain experience, unfortunately, but it was a confluence of just like the right moment, you know. I was lucky.
Do you have any on-set memories or special stories that really shaped kind of your following performances or your life?
Oh, could we narrow down that question a little bit?
Okay. Any like from your early childhood,
Okay.
stories of being on a set
Sure.
that really influenced the rest of your work? I know it's a loaded question.
Probably just a lesson about perseverance, which you're kind of talking about, would be, excuse me, when I was 10 and we were working on Hocus Pocus, and I had this one sequence in which I actually got to be up on the flying rig with the witches, and when I first heard about that, gosh, that sounded so exciting. Cut to 5 hours later, you're been in one position in a harness, and you know, it's very stifling physically, and it's hot, and you want to come home. But she just kind of burst into song and started serenading me and the rest of the crew at a particularly rough and draining moment. And it was so beautiful that it just kind of taught me something about sticking with it and finding a moment of, not to be too cheesy, but like beauty in peace in an otherwise stressful situation.
Absolutely.
And that, I think, is a helpful lesson for this kind of
Definitely
work.
something to keep in mind.
For life and for your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have to take a short commercial break, but when we get back, we will be back with Thora Birch and more of her stories on her past experiences. Stay tuned. Welcome back to See You at USC. I'm joined now by actress Thora Birch. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Now, if you missed us before the commercial break, we were talking about Thora's early childhood life and acting and those experiences. And so I want to ask now what you're currently working on.
Well, after taking a break and actually finally getting a college degree years later after graduating high school.
Education is important.
It is. And you need one to realize how important it is. So I kind of like spent some time evaluating, like, oh, you know, is this really what I want to do in, you know, my full-on adult years? And just spending some time analyzing all of that. Yeah, at the end of the day, storytelling is really my number one passion. So I I reapproached it through writing first. I wrote a play, and I wrote a screenplay that I'm currently producing with an eye to direct. And last year I shot 4 indies. 2 will probably most definitely be out this year, so it's been a nice pickup.
It's been a busy
2 years, yeah.
So you're now doing kind of the things on the other side of the camera, it sounds like.
I mean, I think you could actually find old interviews from me when I was 9 years old saying how I was going to be a cop and a ballerina and a director.
Big dreams.
Big dreams. I gave up on ballet because I'm too curvy. And it's too much work.
It is a lot of
So
work.
I'm going to go for something even harder, directing.
Yeah, seriously. What kind of approaches have you thought of, or who have you learned from in your experiences?
I think you really start learning by being an astute audience member. And I think that obsessive quality from a young age of watching certain films over and over and then picking directors that you like and following their whole careers and their trajectory and their philosophy on filmmaking and just analyzing film itself is it lends itself to one becoming invested in the overall story instead of your just your portion as an actor and just what you can bring to that role. You know, you get more ambitious creatively. So to try to tiptoe into that realm where you're creating the world instead of just a specific person or moment is very exciting.
What kind of films have you kind of favored, or like what are some of your favorite films that you've drawn inspiration from?
I mean, I have a lot of influences. I tend to go by certain groups of specific directors that I really respond to their work overall. You know, we could go for anywhere from you know, Hal Ashby to Stanley Kubrick to Paul Thomas Anderson now, and Cuarón and all of the greats that are around right now, and also going back, you'll find common sensibilities, and that kind of auteur's vision is something that speaks to me. I like it when a director's presence can be felt but isn't all-consuming for the audience. Yeah,
I like that. So what kind of stories are you looking into, or what sparks your interest?
For me, the stories that I find that I like watching the most are usually heavily character-driven, quite topical. They usually have something to do with the current political climate or interpersonal dynamics in the context of the culture of the era of that film. So, you know, anything from like Network to back in that day to All About Eve back then, and now it's been a while since we had a good movie now, but
opinions coming out.
I don't know.
So you're also, along with the directing, the writing, you're also a creator of a production company as well.
Yeah.
You want to speak a little bit about that?
Oh gosh, as soon as I know what I'm doing, I'll come back and we can have a talk
about all of that. Is that a brand new kind of establishment, or?
No, it's not so new. It's just that I haven't quite gotten good enough to talk about it.
Okay.
I wait till I have a little bit more success on that one.
Well, we'll wait for the indie films.
It's hard. I mean, I will say that, you know, I think people get so excited when they're presented with an opportunity, like such as, you know, let's say they'll have a script, and you know, you could do a budget for it, and it seems like, well, this should definitely be a $5 million script. Mostly you're going to get people coming at you and say like, well, I think you should really do this for 1.2. You can, you know, you could have a real success on your hands then. The thing is that you're not going to make the same product with the 1.2. So it's that uphill battle of fighting for a bottom line that is conservative for your investors, but also maximizes your creative potential. And that, as soon as somebody knows how to do that, they're going to be a billionaire because they're going to write a book about it. And then everyone else will know how to do it.
And all the rest of the producers will want to get on it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would guess, because like USC is a very film-operated entertainment school, what advice would you have for actors, filmmakers, writers, anything in that industry or realm?
I would say, for number one, find your passion, what it is that you really, really love about filmmaking, and then and pick that, because I think sometimes people come into it thinking like, oh, I'd like to be this, and then they start pursuing that, and then they realize maybe their capabilities or even their tastes are more geared towards something else in that. So like, I would say that if you feel like, you know, you're interested in acting and it's not really working out, but you still want to be a part of filmmaking, then find some, because there's great careers in all manner of filmmaking. It takes an army. It does. It's not one person. I think people get trapped up into being like, oh, well, the director is the king, or the producer's the last, you know, where the buck stops. It's not. It's a collaborative effort. And that's an encouraging thing. But also, I think that there tends to be a lot of people will say like, oh, well, there's common wisdom, you know, like if you want to do this type of thing, you have to be in New York. If you want to do that type of thing, you have to be in LA. I don't really necessarily subscribe to a lot of those rules, and I found that a lot of successful people don't either. So I think sometimes when you hear generalities in the essence of advice, you have to take them as that, as a simple, you know, you can always find your own path, basically.
Now, you grew up in LA, so you've only have you only lived here or worked here?
I've lived in other places, but I'm mainly, born and bred LA girl.
Do you think that's inhibited your work or helped it?
Well, growing up in the era that I did in filmmaking, there was a lot more travel with your work, everything. And it's still, to this day, something is rarely shot in Los Angeles. It's usually shot somewhere else. And that always gives you a good perspective. And I think for me, I like to say that I'm from LA. I don't know if I necessarily grew up or like became an adult in an LA sense, but I'm from here, so.
Well, we love our LA natives.
Thanks.
So, you have done movies for a long time, but you said you took a hiatus to go and study and work in school. What did that time off kind of teach you, or what did you learn about yourself in that time off?
Well, I think a large part of me taking the time to just pursue a degree was kind of the quest of, the eternal, why am I here? What am I doing with my life? Am I really contributing to society in a way that helps, while at the same time doing something that you really love? And I thought, well, maybe I can look for that other in outside of the business. So I got my legal studies degree with an idea that maybe I would eventually go to law school. And
very different.
It's like advertising. People, when you go to school for advertising, you realize that you don't want a career in advertising. So I think I went to school for the law to realize I don't want a career in the law. But it pulled my focus into what, how do you feel I personally can make the greatest impact or contribute to the things that I want to be a part of in life. And I really do believe that film and television and just entertainment on a whole is an incredibly powerful tool, and an educational one. It can be used for good and it can be used for not good. But I think that it is a wonderful opportunity to help shape the hearts and minds of a culture.
Looking forward, what do you think the impact, or what do you see the future of television and filmmaking looking like?
Well, I think that already there is no difference so much between film. The barriers are breaking down between film and television. I think with the rise of the miniseries, you're seeing much longer films. Like when you look at such The Young Pope, that's just a really long film, and it's a really good one. And in the sense that it gives you a lot more time to focus on the characters and create a tone and a vibe. And it's something that could, I'm sure the creators want you to keep revisiting that over and over. Just like when I was a kid, I watched those same movies over and over. So I think that there's more opportunities for a broader range of types of stories to be told. And there's more time now with the audience's shift to binge watching and all of that. Yeah, so already we're being trained to take in more at longer periods of times, or to follow a story in a condensed and yet more concentrated way that I think is great for filmmakers.
Yeah. And you talked earlier about loving films of all decades. So if you could produce a film or star in a film of any decade, what would it be?
Oh no, I can't pick one. Oh,
a few. You can give a few examples. Just for popcorn, I'm not a musical fan in general, but for the popcorn element, films like Chicago was great, Moulin Rouge. Singing in the Rain.
Yeah, so one of those, anything Aaron Sorkin ever wrote, one of those.
Yeah.
Something Scorsese did, do one of those. Not The Temptation of Christ,
the Dream
but
Resume.
the other ones. Yeah.
The Dream IMDb page.
Absolutely.
That's what we're building here.
Oh, yeah, totally. Oh, God, it'd be a long page.
So, other than acting, I know you said you had a ton of passions. You wanted to be a ballerina or a police officer. So what makes you passionate? What takes your interest in something and makes you want to do it?
Inspiration, but also I think just a full awareness. It's like, excuse me, I have horrible allergies. There's this term that was popular back in the 90s. It was not really a term, it was more of an analogy. It was like, oh, he's like a dog with a bone in his mouth. You just keep running with it. And that's what a producer is. A producer with a script is somebody who's just so invested in that one vision or that one thing. So when I see a character or a piece of writing or a story, it all is material based first. It's not so much like what I can contribute to it, but I try to judge the merits of the story itself. So that is usually what inspires me first and foremost.
Awesome. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I loved talking to you today,
Thank you.
and I
Thanks.
loved hearing your stories.
Thank you.
And that is the finale episode for Wednesday nights here on CU. Be sure to tune in the next 2 nights for our last 2 episodes here at 6:30, and we will see you next season on CU at USC. Good night.
Thank you guys for joining us on today's first episode of Balance.
Go get your own tots. Gosh, you flippin' idiots.
The year was 1938, and the U.S. sat on the brink of another world war. The American people looked for diversion from the trials and tribulations of a new century and its new problems. In 1940, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt authorized the release of an entirely new form of entertainment.
Today, a hope of many years standing is in large part fulfilled.
It was called the Trojan Visual and Auditory Mimeograph Device, or Trojan Vision for short. As bombs fell and war was waged, society tuned